So we've just finished our first major post-rotation tournament, and the winner was Dragapult VMAX, a card that not a lot of people have been talking about, and no one really saw coming. This video, we're going to talk about the deck list, exactly how it works, and why it might be a good choice for the early Sword and Shield meta. So if you've played the standard format for any amount of time, you'll remember Dragapult VMAX as a very potent attacker. It's very strong, it's 2 energy attack, max phantom, deals 130 damage, and then you can place 5 damage counters on your opponent's benched Pokemon in any way you want. That's obviously very potent, and at the moment, a lot of decks are playing support Pokemon that have around about 90 HP, so with a few pings of max phantom, with things like Zigzagoon, or with cards like the new quick shooting Inteleon, we can very easily remove our opponent's Pokemon from their bench and start setting up big knockouts for game. The other thing that we can do with this list, which is very powerful, is we can slow our opponents down. Cards like Path to the Peak, a stadium card where when we play it in play, our opponent's Pokemon with a rule box no longer have any abilities, as well as the supporter card Marnie, are very, very strong in stopping our opponent from playing the game. Dragapult VMAX really only needs 1 turn, and those damage counters start to really add up. So if you can stall out your opponent and start attacking with Max Phantom, you will do relatively well. Now the question is, how can we power up a second Dragapult? There's not really too much Psychic Energy acceleration. Well, we have 1 copy of Raihan. Sorry about the shiny nature of this one. I haven't got a full art yet. But this card is obviously very, very good. A single Raihan can be searched out for free with a Sobble or with the shady dealings in Inteleon, and then you can accelerate an energy from your discard pile and search out another card from your deck. That means that you can go from having no Dragapult VMAX in play to one being powered up in a single turn, which can be very, very potent. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how this deck works. I've got a couple of games lined up for you. If you like this video and you want to see more of this style of content, then please leave a like down below. Thank you very much to the people who have liked the last video. We do have another character-based deck coming for you soon, but before we do that, we've got to play these games, right? So let's jump onto the ladder and see how this thing works. So with Dragapult, we really only need to do 2 things at the start of a turn. Our opponent's playing Rayquaza here. This is actually going to work out perfectly. We only really need to do 2 things. That is, 1, we need to get a Sobble in play so that we can use our Drizzile line, and we're drawing 5 cards here. Hello, Razor Prototype. How are you doing? We've just been given a monster hand now. That's insanity that we've managed to get that many cards. What was I saying? We need to get a Sobble in play, and we need to attach an energy to our Dragapult. We happen to have all of those things. To be fair, we had them before we drew the extra cards anyway. This just makes our life a lot easier. And the reason that we need to get that energy attachment is because if we miss one, we actually can't attack until turn 2 or 3, which becomes very, very difficult. So what we're going to do, we are going to level ball here. I'm going to grab myself another Sobble, because we need to have a lot of those in play to get an acceptable engine going. Then I'm going to grab another Dragapult. I'm going to throw that onto the bench, and then I'm going to attach to the active. I don't think I really need to do too much else. I'm just going to bite here and deal a few damage counters to this Rayquaza. I'm not too worried, but it is important to note that I could actually get knocked out next turn. Rayquaza V and VMAX are very potent attackers, and all it will take is a couple of energy from Fluffies to be able to take a knockout on a Dragapult V. So we can see our opponent has double Fluffy already. They've got another Rayquaza on the bench. If they manage to get like switch lightning energy and then another retreat, then they will be able to knock this Dragapult out, which would usually be a massive problem. But it's actually not too bad, and we'll find out why in just a second. You can see there's a switch. They're going to get 2 lightning energies with Dynamotor here. How potent is Rayquaza to be able to power up this quickly? It's actually very frightening. And the second switch. Okay, so we are going to be seeing a big attack here. Doesn't look like they have the energy yet, so they're going to be using Azure Pulse to try and get it. But if they find the lightning, then they will knock the Dragapult out, which is... it's very frightening. A very potent way to start this game off. But I think we can actually punish our opponent for doing this. So, they've got it. That's crazy. Unbelievable. Okay, so they get a max burst. They're going to discard all of their lightning energy and take 2 prizes on the Dragapult, which is obviously very annoying. But to be honest, I think that in the long run, it's going to be a bit of a misplay. We're going to promote our Dragapult. We've prepared for this moment. We have a couple of Drizzile. We've got Dragapult VMAX in hand. And most importantly, we have Raihan. We're going to accelerate to that Dragapult. We need a Psychic Energy, so I'm going to grab the Horror Psychic here. I'm going to throw that onto the active. We're going to evolve into Dragapult VMAX. And now we can start looking for some trainers with our Drizzile line. And to be honest, I think there's only really one trainer that I want. I want Path to the Peak. I'm going to slow this Rayquaza deck right down. Another thing that we might need to do, actually, that's Drizzile. We can go for another Sobble here if we want. We could Level Ball for a Sobble. I think that's fine, because we've got the Evo Incense in hand. We can get another Drizzile or the Shady Dealings Inteleon. But to be honest, I think another Sobble is good. We've got the Zigzagoon, so we can send that down. We can ping the Mareep on the bench, which is very, very powerful. And then we can max Phantom. We do 130 to the active, and then I'm going to put all 5 onto that Mareep on the bench. That'll take a prize for us, which is obviously very strong, but most importantly, it's going to stop our opponent from ever being able to knock out our Dragapult in one shot. Plus the Path of the Peak means that they're actually not very likely to draw cards at all here. I wouldn't be surprised if they simply attach and pass. They're quick balling. They're going to grab another Mareep. Is that last card a supporter? It has to be if they want to do anything in this game. And to be honest, they're not really playing like they have a supporter, to be honest. They don't. Okay, so we've shown the real strength of this deck right away. We've got Scoop Up in our hand. We're going to do the exact same play again. We're going to ping the Mareep that's on the bench, deal some damage to that, and that means we can knock it out with Max Phantom. Then I'm going to use Drizzile here, and we're just going to start setting our board up, because we know our opponent has nothing. There's absolutely no risk of us getting hard punished. We definitely can't lose the game. I'm going to grab another Dragapult though. What I would like to do is I'd like to get my Inteleons going. I'd like to get a backup Dragapult just in case the worst happens, and then I'm going to research here. All I really care about is one energy. If we find an energy, we're fine. We've got one with the Psychic. Important to note as well that Fog Crystal isn't out to energy too. And then we've got the double Inteleon, which is fantastic because we can actually ping the benched Fluffy here and deal a bit of damage to that. Now, obviously, the Rayquaza is going to be knocked out pretty soon. But the question becomes, can I do it next turn? To be honest, I think I can. 130 plus 160 is 290. So no matter what happens next turn, we can take a knockout on the Rayquaza VMAX. We can also potentially take all 4 of our prizes next turn with the boss's orders that we have in hand. And our opponent is not likely to draw any cards at all. They didn't have a supporter last turn. They need to have one now. And if they don't, then we just win the game. And you can see how potent that combination of Path of the Peak and the Inteleon pings can be. We managed to get the win against Rayquaza. We didn't even play Marnie a single time. So we're into another game now, and Suicune is our opponent. Our hand's actually pretty good, but Suicune poses a bit of a threat to us because unlike Rayquaza, this deck can get a little bit tricky when it comes to taking knockouts. They've not done a particularly good job of setting up just yet, but the way this Suicune deck works is essentially they're going to do damage based on the amount of Pokemon in play. The amount of Pokemon on the bench, if they get 10 Pokemon in play, they can do 220 damage. With the Ludicolo, which it looks like they're playing as well, they can actually get up to 320 damage in one turn and knock us out in one shot. So I think we have to be careful about benching this game. What we definitely need to do though is we have to get ourselves a Dragapult. We must get a Dragapult because that's our attacker. And we also need to get another Sobble, because if our opponent knocks the Sobble in the active out, then they're actually going to put us in a position where we don't have a way to draw any cards next turn, which would be really, really bad. Luckily, the cards that we have left over, Level Ball can search for Drizzile, which can then get us a Professor's Research, which will give us extra cards to work with. Plus, we have the VMAX in our hand, so we know that we're at least going to be dealing 60 damage with Shred next turn. The likelihood is, though, that we'll be able to get our Max Phantom off. And I'd like to be able to get it off as quickly as possible because these Lotans have 60 HP, and you're starting to see why Dragapult is such a good attacker. It hits into the main attackers of decks really comfortably and can take knockouts on those benched support Pokemon, which is really, really important. We see a Zigzagoon. That ping is not necessarily very relevant, but they do want to have extra Pokemon in play because of Suicune's attack, so definitely worth them doing that. We can see another Lotad here and a Quick Ball, so they're probably going to grab another Suicune. Looks like they're going for a Rangaroo, which is an interesting choice, but they're not threatened next turn. They're not going to get knocked out. The big issue here, though, is if they miss another Suicune next turn, then they might be in a bad position where they're not able to actually keep up with us with our attackers. Because the second that we knock out this Suicune, if they don't have another one down, it is going to be quite tricky for them to start attacking. They have Melanie and stuff, so it's not going to be too bad. But you know, it's always gonna be little problems along the way. Now, we've just top-decked into Fog Crystal, which is fantastic because that means that we can just search out the energy. We no longer need to risk the Professor's research to get that attachment, so we will be max phantoming. And then let's get Drizzile here, grab ourselves a Professor's research because we want to draw as many cards as we can. We don't have anything to discard, we just want 7 fresh cards. And to be honest, I'm in a position now where I think I'm okay with getting a couple of extra Pokemon down. Those 2 Pokemon are actually fantastic. Getting the Dragapult and the Sobble is pretty good. We don't even really need to play the Dragapult down this turn if we don't want to. But to be honest, I don't think that there's a way that they can punish us for it, so we will put it down. And then we will max Phantom, 130 to the active. Now, I'm going to place all 5 damage counters on one of these Lotads. I don't know if this is the right play. They could play Scoop Up Net. They could just evolve into a Lombre. So there are a lot of factors involved in that. They've just evolved into the Lombre, so it's not the end of the world. But, you know, we can take a knockout on that Lombre next turn still. It's not impossible. Plus, the damage on the Suicune is actually very, very relevant here. We're going to get an Inteleon next turn if we want one. We're going to Marnie. We've got a whole bunch of stuff that we can do, and we should be taking a knockout on their active attacker next turn. Now, they've used the Ludicolo. The Ludicolo is very powerful. It adds an extra 100 damage to your basic Pokemon's attacks for the turn, which means that this Suicune is now very, very powerful. They can never get to 320 though, because I'm not going to give them the benched Pokemon to be able to get there. At the moment, they can still deal a lot. They can deal, what, 2 times 8? Plus 2? Which is not quite 320. So that's all good. Usually had Scoop Up Net there, which is really strange. They elected to evolve the Lombre and not scoop that up, but I guess they want to have the Ludicolo in their hand to get as much damage as possible. So that makes sense in a way, I suppose. Now, this is going to be very interesting. We've top-decked the Drizzile, so we no longer need to use Evo Incense for that, which means we can grab another Dragapult VMAX if we'd like. We can also make a really cute play here if we want to. We could potentially take a knockout on the Suicune whilst also knocking out another one of their benched Pokemon by using Max Phantom and attacking into, say, an Rangaroo or a Lombre. We could search out Boss's orders with this Drizzile, and that's a very tempting prospect for me. We can search for a trainer card here. It's either that or we just attack straight into the Suicune, but I think I like the idea of grabbing... Oh, do we just... Well, maybe we just grab Path of the Peak. It doesn't really matter, right? They've got 1 Suicune. They've got 3 cards in hand. I feel like... this is a tough choice. I think that if we get the boss's orders, there's only 1 boss, which makes it very, very awkward. But I think if we get the boss here, it actually makes it as hard as possible for our opponent to win the game anytime soon. They will likely not even be able to get another attack, which is very, very good for us. We can play down the extra Dragapult. We can use boss's orders here. And we'll gust up the Rangaroo. That has 130 HP. We'll put 20 damage on with the Inteleon, and then we can max Phantom for 3 prizes, knocking out their consistency Pokemon and their attacker, which is pretty good. And we also get to put 10 damage somewhere else because they've only got, what, 40 HP left? Yeah, so we'll put 40 on there, and then we can chuck 10 down onto that Lotad and put it within range of me max phantoming it next turn, which would be fantastic. Now, the only thing we could have done better that turn is if we'd managed to find a Path to the Peak. It would really show off how powerful this deck can be when your opponent misses turns. Although it is going to be very, very tough for them. They need to have Suicune, Energy, Switch, and Melanie in their hand, and they only have 4 cards, so they need them all to be perfect in order to get an attack this turn. And if they don't get an attack, then we are effectively going to win the game. We can max Phantom, we can take 2 prizes, depending on which Pokemon are in play. We can either attack the Lombre, knock out the Zigzagoon, or one of the other of the Ludicolo lines if we'd like. We've got another Inteleon we could use, we've got Research, we've got so many options. And that's what this deck does a really good job of, right? Is setting itself up to, you know, you might lose the first couple of prizes, but eventually you're going to outpace your opponent because they will miss turns because of the oppressive nature of Path to the Peak. So I guess the only thing, if you're not going to play Dragapult, the big thing to learn out of this video is that Path to the Peak exists. And you will lose games to it. And our opponents just passed here. This, yeah, they've just conceded. Fair enough too, to be honest. That was always going to be tough. So that was a really strong performance from Dragapult, but how good is this thing really? Well, I mean, it did win that 300 plus player event. Its playability and consistency is really good. Its value is a little bit lower on the scale. I'm giving it a B because Dragapult and Inteleon are both relatively expensive cards, but you know what? It's a fun deck. It's a good deck. I give this one an A, but be careful. Do not expect this deck to be 100% guaranteed to get you wins. You will occasionally lose because your opponent just draws out of that power plant lock, the Path of the Peak lock. Oh my goodness, the power plant doesn't exist anymore. Ignore that. But yeah, it is obviously not without its risks, so do be careful. So is Dragapult VMAX the best deck in the format? Probably not, but it still poses a pretty solid option for people who are looking for a nice and efficient way to enter into the standard format. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. If you do, remember to leave a like, comment down below, all that kind of stuff. Tell me how you're feeling, how you doing, you alright? It's tough out there. I'm proud of you. Anyway, I'll leave you with it. Thank you everyone for coming along today, and I will see you next time for more from the Sableyes. Bye.